Matthew begins his infancy narratives with the genealogy which traces Jesus from Abraham down through the Davidic line. We are told that Jesus was conceived when Mary and Joseph were engaged, but not yet living together. Upon finding that Mary is pregnant, Joseph seeks to dismiss her, but he is told in a dream that the child was conceived by the Holy Spirit, and that he would save the people from their sins. In chapter 2, we have the story of the wise men who have followed the star and are seeking the newborn king. Herod is alarmed when hearing of this birth, and instructs the wise men to return to him after they have found the child. However, after paying homage to Jesus, the wise men do not return to Herod and go back to their own country from another route. Herod decides to kill all male children under the age of 2 in order to remove the threat of this new king. However, Joseph has had another dream and is told to flee to Egypt, and so the life of Jesus is spared. When Herod dies, Joseph is told to return to Nazareth. Following his dedication of his work to Theophilus, Luke begins his infancy narrative with announcement stories of John the Baptist and Jesus. After being visited by the angel, Mary visits Elizabeth and finds out that what the angel has told her about her kinswoman is true. And if this is the case, then what the angel told her about herself is also true. The story of the birth of John the Baptist then follows. And following the birth of John the Baptist, we have the birth of Jesus, which, not attended by wise men, nor marked by a star, but witnessed by lowly shepherds. Following Jesus' birth, we have the presentation of Jesus in the temple, where we hear from the story of Simeon and Anna, who were promised that they would see the Messiah before they died. Finding of Jesus in the temple at the age of 12 is the story that concludes the infancy narratives, depicting Jesus as wise beyond his years. If we look at the similarities between the two stories, we find that in both, Jesus is conceived when Mary and Joseph are legally engaged or married but have not yet come to live together. In both stories, Joseph is of Davidic descent. In both stories, there is an angelic announcement of the birth of Jesus. In both stories, Jesus is conceived by the power of the Holy Spirit. There is the directive in both stories that the child is to be named Jesus. In both stories, the birth of Jesus is chronologically tied to the reign of Herod the Great. And in both stories, Jesus is born in Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth. Now let's look at how the stories are different. In Matthew, the genealogy is presented, and the visit of the Magi associates Jesus with the Davidic Messiah. Herod's plot and the escape to Egypt echo parallel stories about Moses, depicting Jesus as a prophet like Moses. In Luke, the shepherds, the marginalized, are the first to receive the news of Jesus' birth. In the stories of Simeon and Anna, even the smallest of God's promises are kept. One of the distinguishing marks of each of the Gospels is in the way in which they portray Jesus as the Christ, the one sent by God. And even at this high level of analyzing these two texts, the differences quite clearly provide us with the Christological view of each of our authors. In Matthew's account, we are presented with images that the Jewish hearers would have readily identified with another major biblical figure, that of the young Moses. In the beginning of Exodus, we are told that Moses' birth is announced to his father in a dream, along with what his mission was to be to the Jewish people. We find a parallel account of the killing of the innocents when an angry Pharaoh orders the killing of all Hebrew male children. Moses is saved from this fate by being placed in a basket only to be discovered by Pharaoh's daughter and adopted by them. As a young man, Moses ends up in an altercation with an Egyptian and kills him. He flees, and he's told to return to Egypt in a dream following the Pharaoh's death. The parallels here aren't identical, but there is certainly enough there to begin to establish that Jesus is a prophet like Moses, although not exact. In Luke, you could say that his portrait is summed up in Mary's response to her cousin's greeting. We know this as the Magnificat. And Mary